You are now listening to Broken Line Podcast, presented by Fish Addictions TV. Ice Strong Titanium Spring Bobber, Eskimo Ice Fishing Gear, 13 Fishing, Striker Ice, Coles Resort of Bemidji, Minnesota, Aaron Eichhorst Photography.
All right, so we're back for another podcast, and we have a guest today.
A very, very special guest. I've been waiting for this guest for a long time.
And he is, is a biologist type?
That's right, yeah. Fish biologist
DNR
background.
Type. Great, so we're going to get nerdy.
It's going to get deep.
So I was down in my room, and I have this airplane pillow.
Uh-huh.
I was going to bring it up here and put it and say, this is what I'm doing. And
yeah.
I was just going to lean back and just kind of enjoy you guys taking over.
Before we get too deep, happy St. Patrick's Day to you guys.
It is St. Patrick's Day today.
I haven't seen any leprechauns. I didn't set out any traps either.
Did you go out for your yearly annual green eggs beer? The whole works?
No.
Taking eggs?
I don't do well with dyed food. Like with the whole purple and green ketchup phase that went in. Couldn't do it. Psychologically, I could not do it.
I thought about a Bloody Mary at breakfast, but thought better
we enjoyed
of it.
breakfast at the bunkhouse.
The bunkhouse.
See,
if you would have went to Keg and Cork or anything like that, they would have been packed because they do like the kegs and eggs and stuff, and it's just
everything's green.
Yeah, everything's green.
But Scott, why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers here?
Yeah, I'll give people a background. So Scott Mackenthun, and pretty avid angler. My background and what I hope to share with you guys today is to talk about my background in biology because it is how I apply it to fishing. And I can tell you my day job is working as an area supervisor at the Hutchinson, Minnesota DNR Fisheries Office. We've got 7 counties in southern Minnesota. We manage all fish resources down there, so lakes, streams, rivers, you name it, anywhere you've got a sport fishery. I've been working there for 2 years. Prior to that, I had a few different gigs, 8 years in Waterville, Minnesota with that field station, and then also doing some regional work. So I was a fisheries specialist, what Minnesota calls their fish biologist, generally called specialists, and then promoted to an assistant supervisor at that office, and then took on some regional work as an aquatic habitat specialist across 34 counties in southern Minnesota. So we did some, anytime you see aquatic plants, they're property of the state of Minnesota. They're regulated that way, and as fishermen, we recognize that's fish habitat, that they're really important and need to be protected. So worn a few different hats, got a little bit of experience in a variety of things, which fits my personality. It's a little bit of everything, kind of a generalist, a master of none, but dabble in all of them. So that's my professional background. Everybody, how do you get started, right? All these, everybody's got their story. How'd you get going in the fishing world? I came from a family that did very little fishing. That's not a knock on them. It's just growing up on a farm. You're busy. We milked cows. We raised hogs. We had corn and soybeans and alfalfa to bale and wheat, and it was you were busy. So there weren't a lot of vacations. But my saving grace probably was a couple of great parents that supported what I did. Would drop me off to go fish at the lake. I got down there as much as I could. Jump on the bike down there. Lake Marion on Highway 15, if you're wondering.
And exact pinpoint location.
Exactly. Everybody's got their home waters. You got to let them know.
Absolutely.
And from there, it was a set of grandparents, right? Grandfathers, both on my mother's and father's side. Did a lot of fishing with them. They were pretty into it. Seemed to have, skipped a generation, it seems like, but Patrick, you and I were talking about, your time living in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and you spent time going to Joe's Sporting Goods. I can remember going with my grandfather at the old Joe's Sporting Goods location and him basically treating me to a shopping spree.
Nice.
Go out, get whatever you want. What better way to get a kid hooked when he can fill a whole tackle box full of stuff? So I bought a bunch of stuff that I didn't know how to use and then sort of built my skills in eventually around that, figured out, you have to, rig up these plastic
And didn't we
worms.
just have that conversation earlier today about, Scott's got this fairly good sized bag of ice tackle, and it was like, I use probably 3.3% of what's in here. It still translates down as an adult angler. You start collecting.
Yeah,
you get this massive collection of gear. And
no doubt. But that was the background. I mean, I was a fish geek. It was as much fishing as I could. Subscribing to In Fisherman when I was in 1991. From there on out, and the good thing about In Fisherman, and it's still to this day, it's about applying science, fishery science. So Rob Newman and Rob Newman and I can see his face. Where's the glasses?
Look in his face.
Steve
Quinn.
Steve Quinn. Yeah,
they're both members of the American Fishery Society. They're certified fish scientists. They've been published in the literature. They understand that approach, and they've did a great job of taking fishery science and applying it to angling. Not only where are you going to fish and the technique you're going to use, but how you're going to do it. Right. And that's always sort of fascinated me. So this was before internet. It was when a family that didn't fish, it was go to the library, read as many books as you could, subscribe to magazines, read it voraciously, go fish as much as you can, and try to build your knowledge. It was before the internet. But I was hooked on it. The other thing I can really point to is 4-H. Right now, growing up on a farm, everybody associates 4-H and FFA with agriculture, and that's a natural association because they have grown hand in hand. But it goes beyond agriculture.
Right.
That program is so great for both those programs for youth development. So I was in this fishing sports project area, and I did this interview when I was in the second grade out at the Hutchinson Fisheries office, mind you.
Second grade.
I still have it. I still have this project. And I interviewed Chris Kavanaugh on his job as the area supervisor there. Now, Chris was in Hutchinson for a year or two, and now he's in Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, yes.
Yep. And Chris, I still have this on tape, and I walked out of there going, oh, my gosh, this is such a neat job. This is what I want to do. How many kids, when they're 8 years old,
you're in second grade,
know what you want to do? Right. So I was sort of fixated on it, knew what I needed to do, had some good advice along the way, met some great people. I'll spare you the details of who and how and what and where, but go off to college, University of Minnesota, stay on, get a bachelor's in fisheries and wildlife, stay on, get a master's degree in fisheries and aquatic biology. And part of the charmed existence was to be able to step in and take a job with Minnesota DNR and work as a fish biologist.
Is that not a pretty high amount of schooling for that position of a job, or in the DNR you're a higher ranking of some sort? I'm guessing
it is. It's a very competitive field to get into, and I know you've talked with some of your guests about how DNR works, and I've heard folks say it is very competitive. I can vouch for that. I tell our interns, I tell our young collegiate folks that I see, like, this is a very competitive field. It's almost like being a doctor, a dentist, or a lawyer. Maybe not to that level, but not far behind, because I chose to go to the concrete jungle. I went to the University of Minnesota to focus in and take care of business. If I'd have gone to Brookings or Stevens Point or Bemidji, I'm concerned that I would still be out on those lakes fishing. I mean, it's not to say I didn't.
I'm one of those guys.
Yeah.
I could have stayed in Minneapolis and got really into the 3D printing deeper and deeper, but the love for fishing drew me back here.
You would have lakes right outside your front door. You don't have that as much down there.
Right. And I went out. I fished Chisago and Washington County. I remember when when I was an upperclassman and could start scheduling later classes, go out to Minnetonka and set tip-ups, or go fish different places, go to Spring or Pryor or wherever. But it was a good thing to knuckle down, because I can remember, the boys are going to go out and have a drink and, howl at the moon. No, I got to stay here. I got to knuckle down and study, because I know I have to get good enough grades to get into grad school. I know I have to have a really good resume that's filled out. So did a bunch of internships, did some research projects, was involved with professional societies, and it gave me enough on the resume to get in the door.
And when you say it's really competitive, that makes me feel good. I think I would feel opposite if it was like, no, there's always job openings. So when you say it's really, really competitive, translation, it's really tough to get a job in Minnesota in this department. That means there's a lot of people that want to do good, that want to help our resource.
There are.
And that's kind of comforting in a way.
Absolutely.
If I was a student, it'd be it'd do two things. It would either encourage me to study even harder to be the best in my class, or
Run.
maybe I need to think something else because the chances of me getting a job. So in actuality, that kind of even translates into when you do get a graduate, you're getting the best of the best.
Mm. And we have diversity. I mean, we've got men and women. We've got pretty good diversity. We're working to build that even more so. I place some value because of the person that I am and having people that fish at least a little bit. And I know throughout our organization who some of our avid anglers are. You know, myself and there's usually somebody at every office that's pretty into it. And those are the folks we want to take the calls, to talk to the anglers, to go out to speak to the Lake Association, to be able to understand it. I remember Bob Marshall writing. He's retired now from writing for Field and Stream, but he wrote this conservation section within their magazine. And one of the stories that I liked the most was he was talking about, do we have a problem with hiring young natural resource professionals who have never picked up a rod, who have never shot a gun, who have never participated in the outdoors? Because would you have a mechanic work on a vehicle if they weren't a driver? Would you have a dentist?
There's businesses out there, though.
That makes a lot of
do
sense.
that.
Right, and I get what he's saying, and I think that's important. But at the same time, it is. I'll say we do strike a pretty good balance. We've got some folks that are eggheads. They're above and beyond myself, that are very analytically talented.
Just
that
data
runs
crunchers.
data crunchers that can do some amazing things, and they're awesome to work with. I mean, it's a very great cohesive unit that works well together, tries to work on fixing fisheries issues, problems, trying to look into the future. It's an exciting place to be.
And where are you stationed out of?
I'm out of Hutchinson.
Because he's just over there like jibber, spitting all this stuff, and I was like, oh, cool documentary, man. Follow him around for a year.
Well,
cool documentary.
We
That's what I was
stopped
thinking.
in at Destination Sporting Goods today and saw our friend Mr. Aaron Templin.
Mm-hmm.
And they got all their muskie gear in. And Scott got a little taste of what it's like to hear the conversation in a local bait shop. And it escalated quickly about the behaviors of certain groups of muskie anglers.
The purists.
The purists. And we'll talk about it later, but there needs to be a documentary. And you need to film this thing because you would watch it. Scott would watch it.
Oh, yeah.
He's all about it. But
I'm just still trying to wrap my head around the fact that we're podcasters, and then he's like about to sing a hip hop album because he's still got the goal. Yo, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, you don't have to put it on. I like looking at it. I was thinking about leaving mine off too. There's not enough noise in here to make it.
Going back to you've got your egghead, quote unquote, data crunchers, and then you also have outdoorsmen within your group too. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, is that something that the DNR is recognized as an added value to have both types of people?
Oh yeah, I mean we've got folks that specialize in all kinds of things, and without going down the road of breaking down the organization and the structure of the agency, I mean, without getting too into detail, I mean it's Minnesota DNR, but there's 6 different divisions. There's Fish and Wildlife, which is where fisheries is housed. Break it down from Fish and Wildlife to Fish and Wildlife, the 2 different sections. And then from there, it's amazing the amount of programs. We've got aquatic education specialists, so people that go out and they're part of our efforts for what we call R3, or what Fish and Wildlife agencies across the country call R3, recruitment, retention, reactivation. We recognize there's a problem that we need to get more people involved. You could do a whole podcast on declining participation in the outdoors, on people aren't buying fishing licenses anymore, on our baby boomers are aging out and they're not bringing new recruits. That's a problem for...
Well, we've been talking about the whole cell phone, video game, iPad in front of a kid instead of the crayons when you go to eat. Like that whole generation, which is a few years behind me. I think I was one of the last 2 or 3 generations where I feel like when we went out hunting with like your dad or your grandpa, you went fishing, there was no cell phones to distract you from. There was no GoPro cameras to distract you if you were trying to film. It was literally just you and your hunting gear, you and your fishing gear, and there was none of that. distractions nowadays. You bring a kid out, we talk about it in fish addictions. We're like, make sure your kid has something to do so they're not bored. What did the kid do 25 years ago?
Yeah.
Did he play with on his iPad? Did he? But I mean, I get it. We talk about, have snowball fights. Let them run around. Let them goof around. Don't force them into that fishing the whole time. But yeah, the generation thing, like you just said, it's declining down, and I can see.
And that's an issue for 13 Fishing, Markham Technologies, Minnesota DNR. It's an issue for the industry. It's an issue for the agencies. It's something that everybody has to work on together. We need to get people excited about it, about fishing, about the outdoors, about getting out there. And so we have people working on tackling that as best we can, where you have folks that are working on individual species management. We've got folks working on large lakes. We've got folks that are dedicated river teams. We've got folks working on all kinds of things. You can get really specialized, or you can be very generalist, and I would consider myself very generalist. Working as a supervisor now, unfortunately, the more promotions you take, the more time you sit behind a table like this and push papers and click buttons. But, there still is some field time for all of us, and I think that's the charismatic thing that you all see, like, oh, got to get out and get on that survey, see those fish, lift those nets.
Yeah, and I can remember I was in high school. I was in a field biology class, and I wanted to take the class several times, but I couldn't. But we went to the Cutfoot Sioux.
Egg tick.
Yep, and we watched them strip walleyes. And I was in high school, and I was already way, way into fishing. I was fascinated with the whole process, but I found myself there at the nets where they're grabbing these walleyes that guys have been fishing for 30 years and haven't seen one of these. And I look down in these nets, and I see there's 24 of these fish that are 10, 12, 13 pounds.
Yep.
They're just taking those eggs out, and then we go back into where they're mixing the eggs and the milk together, and it was just such a cool process, but they don't have that anymore in high school. That was part of one of our field biology classes, and I can remember leading up to when I was younger, I'd hear older students talking about, oh man, we get to go to the fishery today. We get to go watch them strip walleyes. And being a kid that was really into fishing, I couldn't wait to sign up for that class. And that's how that spread about. And I'd really like to see some of these programs kind of come back into school, where there is more the field biology. That's what the class was. I mean, literally in the name, we'd gather in the classroom, take attendance, get on a bus, and we'd go to a lake. We'd take little fine mesh nets and we'd collect bugs. And we would collect weeds. We'd identify weeds and we'd identify minnows and minnow species and stuff like that. Right. It was the coolest thing. And that's what led me into almost going to Oklahoma State University to be an ichthyologist.
You were going to say, Aaron?
I did it one time when I was in middle school. We had the waders on. We're at the pond, and the frogs, tadpoles, the whole little thing. And I did, outside of school, I did sucker stripping or whatever you want to call it. And that was actually at the power dam over here. And I was filming it for, I think it was like maybe a Bemidji Outdoors thing or something. I don't remember. But me and Jake were filming it, and the amount that they would catch is unreal. And I did the bottom feeders show where we bring the nets, and it was commercial fishing show on the Outdoor Channel. And you see some of these fish come in, you're like, of course they're the carp and the crap fish in a sense. To some
you
people.
Gonna take that?
To some people. To some people. But yeah, we're going to get into it. They're huge, huge fish. But the problem with schools nowadays is, me and you have taken kind of road trips, and we've talked about this, is that the school's all about learning like old school stuff and history of school stuff and new stuff, and there is no survival skills. So what if the whole internet, TV, electrical grid goes down? What do you do? How do you survive? Well, you surely aren't pulling out a calculator and doing math or learning how to do math. Those survival skills of like going out and hunting with your dad or going fishing with your grandpa, how to survive, how to make a fire, from not matches and gas. You don't learn that in school.
It takes the right people. I've interacted with a few different teachers from different districts. It takes the right people in the right districts that support those teachers, that do put on fish and wildlife classes, that interact with their local county soil and water offices, that are doing conservation work with Minnesota DNR, with whomever they can, to try to teach those things or get in those experiences. Because we have kids come out to the hatcheries. I mean, I used to give hatchery tours at Waterville. We had a lot of school kids that came through there. Hutchinson's got a couple youth environmental days for 4th and 5th graders. There are some of those events, but you're right, they're getting to be less and less. And
we actually have a high school that is specifically for the outdoors.
Awesome.
Why can't I think of the name? The one right across the street from Slim's. The Voyagers? Yeah, Voyagers
nice.
High School, where they take camping trips and they go
Sure.
explore, and they
you have to find it somewhere, whether it's extracurricular or another organization, or so. You have to find those things, or parents have to help find it, and it's hard. Some of those people are lost, and that's where they need to run into an Aaron or a Patrick or a Scott to get them pointed in the right direction.
When we were out fishing, we were talking about various things, and we started talking. You had mentioned the word transparency between our Department of Natural Resources and anglers and outdoorsmen, hunters, and that kind of stuff. Would that be a good start to gaining more transparency and more communication between the two major groups? Is starting out with these outdoor programs in school?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would lead into some more transparency that way? Or?
Some of it's happening, and I know you talked with Nancy on one of your podcasts, and you talked about the Minocqua program, mm-hmm. and that's the aquatic education I was referring to earlier, where some of that's been done already or attempted, where they're trying to interact and have this curriculum in the schools. There was this award-winning complete curriculum with lesson plans and everything, just a cookbook for how to teach kids aquatic education, the whole 9 yards. And a lot of teachers took that on to learn how to do it, but it has to be carried forward. It has to be maintained. Are the teachers going to continue to do that? I can't answer for them. That's right. The thing.
Okay. Interesting, because,
there might be states out there with plenty of schools, like in the Montana area, Ohio, or Utah, that might actually do, the outdoors in their school. It's just, we're basing this off of, I'm basing it off of my schooling that I've
Your
had
experience.
in my life.
Yep.
And I can tell you, well, this is what I did, and you're doing it yourself, and same. But
right.
There could be, Bemidji, let's just say Bemidji State, they're big into the outdoors.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I think there can be more involvement. Like, I would love to go to science class if I'm going to go, do something outdoorsy,
mm-hmm.
And it was very rare that we did a lot of that stuff. Maybe it's because of the weather. I don't know, but.
Right.
Let's step outside of school for a second. We were talking earlier. Now, you came up with this, was it yesterday afternoon?
Yep.
Or early evening? We've been talking ever since. But I had mentioned, I'd like to see more dialogue between anglers and hunters. I want to talk about round tables.
Sure.
Man, I really strongly feel that there needs to be, or there should be, more, let's use the word again, transparency, or more communication between our fisheries. I have a lot of respect for our fisheries. My dad was Department of Natural Resources, but Forestry Division. Mm-hmm. But I've been around a lot of these guys, and I've listened to the lingo, and
the way that roundtables could ever work is the simple fact of how many people go to city council meetings, right? Those are the people that actually care about the community. They care about this, blah, 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 blah. So when you think of that, how many do you think go? Maybe in a town like Bemidji, maybe 15, 20 people.
Right.
Not very many. When you have a huge community full of thousands of people. So when you get those top outdoorsmen, what you think the outdoorsmen, you're talking about like a round table discussion?
Of anglers talking, just having an open conversation about...
And maybe it's okay if you only get 5 people because that's still conversating. But you're not gonna.
Well, Scott. Not only are this is your job, but you're also an angler,
right?
And you know how deep the passion runs for angling.
Mm-hmm. I want to take your question or your start to your question and just bring it up to how does DNR take public input, and then even talk a little bit. You referenced the roundtable, and maybe talk about what the roundtable is so the audience can understand.
Yeah.
Taking public comment is very important because if I think about how fisheries management works, fisheries, the very base definition of fisheries, we're talking about fish, habitat, and people, those three components. And that's a three-part component that we have to remember. Yeah, we do some habitat monitoring. I talked earlier about working with aquatic plants in that role. We have rules on the books through the regulatory process of what you can and can't do at lakes. Streamside County has rules as well. So we protect habitat that way, as an example. And then the people side. What do we hear? Because we have a clientele that we want to satisfy. We want them to be satisfied, to have good fishing opportunities. That's what we're in the business of, is creating fishing opportunities. So we do try to collect public comment. This is one thing that I've found fascinating is how much angler inquiries do you really get? When I came into the organization, I was always curious, how does this work? Because we've got a general inbox. You can stop by the area office. You can send a letter. You can give them a call, email, all these different venues to contact the DNR. And how often do you hear from folks? I can tell you in a given week, we might get 1 or 2 walk-ups. Chances are probably not going to be about fishing. It's going to be about a different topic. Maybe it's dogs are chasing deer in the neighborhood, or I want to dig a well. Do I need to get a permit from you? Or, those are the types of things that you get. Then even, in our fisheries inbox, we all have this general inbox for our specific area. How many inquiries come in there? I would say 1 or 2 a week. All this to bring up and to put it into perspective is I'm not hearing a lot from folks. Now, I have been involved with a few cases where we do have open public comment for a specific management change. The example I can give, the biggest example I can give, is when I worked in Waterville and there was a proposal to stock muskellunge into Tonka Lake. We had folks that wrote comments. We had folks that stopped in. We got a lot of public comment that way. But still, on the whole, I still wonder, did we really get all that much public comment?
That's kind of what I was saying with the 20-some people in a city. If you don't care about your city enough to go stop the pipeline or whatever you want to talk about with some of the stuff in Bemidji, then I know what you're saying, though. There should be people hardcore in the fishing industry that cares.
Is basically, it'd be really kind of cool, and it'd be fun, and I think it could really open up the door to get things started, is to have a biannual public deal. Hey, 7 o'clock, Green Mill, let's talk about angling opportunities for Beltrami County. And we meet up with fisheries, and they ask us questions.
Sure.
What are you guys seeing out there? You're out there every day.
And I do know I do know a lot of everybody does it a little bit differently. The one thing I always stress to every group that I ever talk to is hand out business cards that say the door is always open, and it is. It's always an open door policy. Just through those same mediums that I talked about. Any questions, comments, concerns you have, bring them out. We want to interact with you.
Do you have a comment box type seal there? So that goes with, we have a DNR headquarters, one of, whatever Bemidji, it is, northwest, northeast, whatever it is, here in Bemidji. I would almost say, how many people have ever stopped out there? How many times have you stopped out there and filled out?
Yep.
So but you're obviously this is what you wanna. You're into it. So I'm just trying to say, if someone outside of someone like you,
and I've led other people to that office door.
They should go there.
Yeah. If you have a problem with something, don't just blast off and start running amok with negative comments. Go down here and knock on this door, because they're going to have.
You know what they're going to do? It's like when they were clearing out the thing last year here at my that whatever
what
netting.
Was it
Stony Wart or something like that.
Oh, sorry, Stonewater.
Yeah. So and they closed off the access, and my dad went to one of the public roundtables for this situation, and we offered the resort's landing to public for free for that period of time.
Sure.
Because we don't want people to not be able to get on the lake.
I'm talking about a round table where there's not a negative connotation, we have this invasive species problem, let's have a round table. There's going to we're thinking about a radical change in a bag limit or a slot limit or something. There's always like some sort of like change connotation. How about just a round table of how's your area doing? What have you guys been seeing? You know, let's collect some firsthand data from experience.
And so everybody does it a little bit differently. A lot of offices put out newsletters or put that type of information out in annual reports or on their webpage. You know, we hear those comments, and it's out there. Those things are out there. If you do have the question, I can't stress it enough, bring it to those folks. They'll walk you through it. And everybody does it a little bit differently. At Hutchinson, I came into a situation 2 years ago, and this year, 2018, 2017/18 is the 19th season that Hutchinson has had this group that meets called the Avid Anglers. We have folks that come from the 7 counties in the Hutchinson management area that want to learn more about what we're doing, see it from our perspective, learn about what our decisions are. And that's what I'd say. It's an open door around the whole state to be able to do that. We do it down there, and that's sort of our special program. Now, why doesn't everybody do it? Well, if you're in Bemidji, you've got an egg take. You've got
I have my answer for it. What I was saying with the whole resort thing with across the lake, opening it all up, social media, how does your take on that? That's the round table. People just go right to social media,
right.
Like forums, like last night when we were talking.
Yeah, there's folks that take to that, and we do have those platforms out there within Minnesota DNR. But I will admit it's cumbersome because it's a government organization, and how much can you put out there? It's a little bit different than operating like a business, and you can share it more quickly. Those opportunities are out there. Anytime there's a management change, certainly that triggers automatically having a public comment period open house. But if you want general information, you want to learn more, interact with those folks. I find folks that come in upset about something, once we sit down and we talk person to person, on the phone or in person, and we talk about, here's what the issue is, here are the tools in our management toolbox, figuratively speaking, that we can use to address this issue. Here's what we know. Here's what we'd still like to know more about. And this is why we made the decision to move forward with this. And then they can get an understanding. And at the same time, it's valuable for me to hear and for our staff to hear that these folks are concerned about this. This is their perspective. Because that weighs into our decision. That's that whole social component of fisheries management, of the importance of the public.
Yeah, when you mentioned that Avid Anglers group, I instantly, as we're fishing and talking, I put that in the back of my head, like, well, geez, I wonder if that's something I could start here in Beltrami County. Be like, get a group of really dedicated anglers that have their concerns, or they have their wishes, or they have some ideas, and start a line of communication with our fisheries management here in town, and just be like, hey guys, this is, we're not coming here to say you need to do this, you need to fix that, or this needs to change, but gather information, exchange information.
It's a great forum. It's a great give and take.
That would be a really neat undertaking to take on here, because this community, as you've seen the short time you've been here, and you've probably heard, there's a strong angling community here. Mm-hmm. It's very competitive. There's a lot of passionate anglers here.
The other thing I want to throw out
a success
to talk about is you bring up the topic of roundtable. Minnesota is unique, and I will argue that Minnesota DNR is a national leader. If you start talking to other states, and you reference Minnesota DNR, they'll point to different things and say they were a leader on this and this and this and this. One of those examples is the roundtable. Minnesota DNR Fisheries and Wildlife started hosting this event they called the Round Table, because at the time it literally was a round table. You would have interests that would come from different groups to meet and discuss different issues. That event has grown, and it's been around for 20-some years.
Yep.
And
it kind of travels around the state, doesn't it?
Well, no, it's always been in the Twin Cities, to my understanding, to my knowledge. I don't go back 20 years, but and you've got different representation. Might be Dark House Association, Muskies Inc., Trout Unlimited. Might be Steelhead Association up on Lake Superior. Might be this guy is big time tournament angler from Northwest Minnesota. This guy's a big trout angler, owns a fly shop down southeast. There was pretty good representation. It wasn't like official business was conducted, but it was a forum, like we talked about earlier. You exchange information, and I think there's an understanding of where we're coming from, what we're learning, And it just eye-opening for folks to see, hey, they're doing research on this. Hey, they learned this, because we've got tons of good data. We're always trying to find a good way from our eggheads and our managers to, send that out. And it's also a venue. Our species work groups go there. We hear a lot. The fisheries has what they call the back porch session. It's an unedited, it's led by the representatives. DNR doesn't take a step in it, doesn't take a leadership position. They just let people talk about whatever. Sometimes you learn more there, I'm told, about how people really feel about things. And that's where, you've heard out of the last couple of roundtables talks about, is it the time to go to a smaller bag limit for walleyes? Is it a time to, be more restrictive? What are the concerns that you have about fishery? And I know, Patrick, you at some point want to talk about technology. That's come up for a number of years up there.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that's a great lead into what I would really like to talk about for a little while here is the advancement of technology and the role it plays on our fish and our management of our resource. And being that I'm integrated into the fishing industry, as they say, quote unquote, I get to see a lot of this technology emerge. I get to hear about it sometimes before it even hits the shelf. And sometimes it spooks me out because I just got the 2018 synopsis, and you brought in something really cool that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I've also noticed that, that it's 2018, that says 1936, and I still see some stuff that's the same. And that's what that starts triggering my mind as I'm like, okay, now we've got certain technologies out there that are making things way easier, especially on the ice and in the boat. You're talking about side imaging. I can shoot out off to the side. I can shoot out 150 yards. I can actually. There's imaging now where you can actually see fish in the weeds.
Right.
Behind rocks. You don't even have to go over there. You can move a cursor over there, drop a waypoint on that boulder.
Georeference
I'm going to come back around and I'm going to just go right on top of it.
Right.
And that seems to me, not that I don't want to see advancement in technology at all, or, I don't want to hinder that. Mm-hmm. But I also think there needs to be a lot of responsibility tied in with it. And I do see a lot more catch and release. I never thought, the little bit of ice angling I did when I was a kid with my dad, it was if that fish hits the top of the ice, it's coming home.
It's coming home. Because
we worked hard. Back in the day, it was, when I started ice fishing, there was power augers. They were big, mm-hmm. but they weren't light, and so there wasn't the 150 hole drill and marathon. Things weren't light. Things weren't easy. We didn't have flashers. There was flashers out, the old green box.
You had a big, heavy permanent that you skidded out somewhere and left all winter.
Right.
You don't have a wheelhouse. You can just plop down somewhere.
Right. And if you were lucky enough to get fish, it was coming home to eat. So at the same time, that translates into very rarely did a guy get a limit. If he got a limit of fish, he got really lucky because he only drilled like 2-3 holes and he fished all day.
Yeah.
But now that's a different story.
Technology is making it to the point where you can clean house.
You can, and it's like the old Spider-Man line of with power comes responsibility.
I use it all the time. I love quoting. Well, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, and I don't have the answer for this. I can remember being in high school, and Jeff Zernoff and Aquaview released the camera, and the legislature, and I don't know how much of an influence.
I remember that.
I don't remember how much of an influence DNR had on it at the time, but there was questions of, oh my God, you're going to be able to watch fish just take a bait. This is going to be the complete and utter annihilation of fish.
There was some serious talk about banning underwater cameras.
There was,
and it was like, I was even like, whoa.
Yeah.
Just because you see it doesn't mean it can bite.
Right. And now I think it's a tool, and there's a time and a place for it, like all these things. And I've talked with some of my colleagues about this. Like, if I had my druthers, I'm taking the flasher 9 times out of 10. Maybe one time I'll take the camera.
I used to have some micro underwater cameras and stuff, and I tried fish. I found it to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, all right, if I'm going to use this, it's just going to be, okay, why are fish here? I want to look at the bottom. Okay, that's locked in, get it out of here, or you've used it to see what things actually look like.
Mm-hmm. Well, that crib for one thing would
and we fished out there today and we talked about that, and I still to this day refuse to look at it on video.
For over a year, we think it's a logging path that sank.
He's still convinced it's a crib, but I think it's a footing from a giant dock.
It is. I could maybe see it being a footing for a piece of dock, but why is it just that? And why is it built Lincoln log style with the perfect amount of gaps for fish to fly through and all this other stuff? But
he also believes in weather machines. I love you, Aaron. I still love you, buddy.
I do believe in weather machines. I was just literally about to say, I'm the type of person where when I look back, I think of how can you, and this is opposite of you, obviously, how can you regulate people to hunting and fishing, etc., when however many years ago, that's how we live, that's how we survive. Now you go to the grocery store and they're okay with poisoning the food and putting all this other stuff in there, blah, 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 but when you want to go catch a fish, you're regulated, you have to pay money, all this good stuff. And that's, I kind of want to hear from the other side of my negativity, if there was people out there that kind of thought, well, why should we pay the DNR $30-50 a year, or why do we have a limit? Back in the day, you had to kill your deer to survive. Now I have to, what I'm saying? So what's your input on that? I got to slip one question in.
Yeah, let me go back just to quickly address, Patrick had asked about what's going on with technology, and that's a really difficult thing to put your hands on because we don't know how many people are impacting it. We know that it makes folks more efficient. We know that. We know that our roundtable folks, like I said, they bring up, guys can pick up a fish individually. They can fish. They some of them in the muskie community, they become pet fish. They know them individually. I mean, it's remarkable.
Absolutely. I hear it all the time. These guys are like, I'm going to go out. I know the weed bed she lives in.
I can remember reading articles 25 years ago talking about intelligent fishing pressure. And it was like, there's fishing pressure, but there's intelligent fishing pressure. And I think about in my job, I was lucky enough to run a creel down in Waterville. And an angler creel is when you go out and you talk to anglers, get information on them, demographics, find out what they're fishing for, what they're targeting, and then, of course, what they've caught and what they've harvested, and put that all together. And that whole idea of 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish. There are specific examples I could point to out of running that creel. I was like, there's a lot of truth to this. There's a lot of people that are out there that don't do a lot of fishing, that just are kind of hanging out, and they're not going to catch a whole lot. But then there are some that are very good, and those are the ones that if they have that power and they don't use it responsibly, they can put a hurting on fish.
And maybe that's the perspective, because I live in that, or quote unquote, live in that realm where everybody I fish with has all this advanced technology, and they want more of it.
Mm-hmm. Will there be a day
I'm like,
when...
whoa, pump the brakes a second here. I mean, is it really that necessary to have this machine on the ice that you stick the transducer down the hole and you kind of rotate it around and be like, oh, well, there's a school of crappies right there. It's 100 feet to your southwest. You pace it off and drill, and you're on them.
Will there be a day where that is outlawed?
Well, or I'm not saying just that, but what if some new stuff comes out?
Yeah, and I don't want to see that stuff gets outlawed.
No.
I'd like to see like a direct reflection upon with our synopsis, with our limits, with our slot limits.
I don't think that day's coming where anything's going to get outlawed. I mean, there's a couple of lakes, special regulation lakes, where they have outlawed electric motor or gas powered motors, or maybe that's something that there's someone that's interested in doing it. I don't know. You'd have to see the social pressure for it first. It's not something that I think DNR would bring forward, but where you can't use electronics, where you wouldn't be able to do those types of things, would that have an impact? But you're right, over time, people become more efficient. But that said, I still think we've got tremendous fishing opportunities in this state for quality and quantity of fish and just diversity of options. So
I bet we're one piece of technology away from making it unfair to the fish or to the deer or any animal.
Well, I said
Especially
that
out
long
in the
ago.
bush.
We pushed the envelope. We get
Yeah.
closer to that line, but I'm not sure. I mean, there's things that cross that line, like throwing a stick of dynamite out there. But I don't know if we're gonna get to that point.
You sit in your TV and you're like, "There's one." You push a button, the gun shoots for you. It's like, come on.
That
the
actually
only
took place
example-
in Texas.
The only thing I can think
I
of
know.
is Minnesota's been really stringent on a couple things. One, most other states allow more than one line. This state's been a one-line state. That's where they've really been restrictive. And the other thing that I see is
And I
they
hear a
don't
lot of
allow
talk
the
about that.
like jawjackers or automatic fishermen for whatever reason are not allowed. And
Well, it's because it
so-
catches the fish for
and
you.
and here, yeah, and so the thing is, like, you kind of get into this: how are our regulations set up? And a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with biology. It's more of fair chase, ethics, and morals. What did people
Okay.
think was acceptable? And you start looking back in the history books, and that's where you see more of these rules that they had more to do with being a sportsman, and you wore your Sunday best, and you went out, and fished in a top coat, and I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
And I get that because, like, I remember when the Alabama rig hit the pro circuit, and some states you were allowed. It was interesting
Yeah.
because, like, let's take Kentucky Lake for instance. Part of it's in Tennessee, and part of it's in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky, they were cool with letting you use the Alabama rig. Tennessee, you weren't. So the guys that wanted to fish this Alabama rig, do you know what Alabama rig is, Aaron? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually remember you
would stick
telling
to
me the
that
story.
the Kentucky
East side.
end of the lake, and I know that you can fish an Alabama rig here in Minnesota, but it can only have one
One hook.
hook. Now, a true Alabama rig has
multiple.
7 or 8 hooks on it.
Yeah.
And me personally, when I seen it, I was like, man, what's next after this? Are you going to be able to attach a spinner blade on a casting net and like pitch that out? Because I was seeing guys that had these giant rods and they sling this thing out there and they're catching 2 or 3 bass in one cast.
And it's a good reminder to check your regulations, read them forwards and backwards. We're in March now. New regulations came out at the first of the month. Always make sure you're reading through them. You're right. I didn't share this yet, but my summer thing is catfishing where I live. I'm close.
Which I want you to tell me that story about the catfish that lives in that.
Oh yeah,
We do.
living-
every I was gonna say every county, state, lake, river. We talk about in our show all the time is you need to obviously know the rules before you step out on that ice or that boat.
So make sure you're checking those out. I mean, I laugh because your Kentucky, Tennessee example, it's like we have fish border waters for catfish. We have guys that specifically fish on the Wisconsin side of the Mississippi, or
Where
the
they can
Croy,
use bluegill
where
for
they
bait.
can use bluegills for bait and use
Right.
three lines. So
Right.
it's one of those deals. But read through on that. I don't know what the future holds for our technology, but as an angler, I like being able to use those things, but we're also seeing a social ethic develop 20, 30 years ago.
But our fisheries are aware of what's going on, obviously.
The industry side and the media has promoted the idea of catch and release, and in certain fish species, the results are incredible. Our bass and our muskies, our lake sturgeon.
It's
catch
getting
and
that way
release
with
fish.
panfish now.
Yeah,
I think us anglers that hunt trophy panfish have really started changing some minds, and I can notice it in the last 10 years.
It's kind of is the glass half full or glass empty? There's more technology, but we have more responsible people. I think on the whole, we have more responsible people.
Well, 20 years from now, you'll say there's more technology. We'll be flying cars. So,
Right.
There's got to be that technology there, but in my mind, I think it needs to be restricted. But that also flows into that question I just asked
Where do
you
you
a
draw
couple
the
minutes
line?
ago. Is that
So now your question, Aaron, was, so give me just a real basic, what's the justification? I pay for a fishing license. What does that get for me? Is that kind of what your question is?
everything? Now, for me, I understand. Well, how do you guys get paid? How do the boat ramps look brand new every couple of years? Blah 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 blah. Where does the tax money come from? All that good stuff. But when you sit there and you think of, okay, I am going to Michigan. I need to now buy a Michigan license. Now I'm going to Wisconsin. I have to buy a Wisconsin license. I'm taking 50 bluegills home with me because I need to feed my family. I'm going to freeze them and I'm going to save them for my family. Or it's, I can only take 10 bluegills, so I'm only going to take 10. Or I'm going to catch a release, etc. But how do you draw that line of, back in the day, let's say Native Americans or settlers, blah, 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 they survived off the natural resources that was put on this planet by whoever, however it got there, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And if there's, there's borderline stuff, and I know that there's people out there that kind of think that way, because I'm on the borderline with government and all that weird
back
stuff,
then, too, there was a lot less people.
Well, that was going to be my first point, is we're talking about a huge difference with people when you come to subsistence fisheries. And then the other thing is just...
But is that just the government, in my mind, kind of controlling...
I think when the first regulations by Minnesota Conservation Department, the precursor for Minnesota DNR, when the first fish limits, we'll say, were set, it was a lot of what was acceptable, what was socially acceptable, what was sporting. It was from the sporting members. It was the participants in the sport viewed themselves as sportsmen, that they had to have a high ethical standard that, well, we really only need this many fish, or, and that's sort of how it's been set. And then over time, we've seen declines in the quality, the large-sized fish certainly has fallen off. So over time, limits have fallen some. There's no doubt about it. But I also think we've made this shift from a subsistence fishery where folks were catching and eating to, it's popular today to be out taking pictures, catch and release. It's been this sort of cultural shift over time, and I think our limits have reflected that. That stings some people when you talk about inflation hits a fishing license, and over every 5 years, 6 years, you're looking for another fee increase of a couple bucks. That stings some people that wait a minute, I have to pay more and I'm going to be able to keep less. Well, I guess it's how do you view it? It's all in the eye of the beholder.
And in my perspective, every time I buy a license, it seems to go up $1. It usually goes up $1.
I mean, there's price influx.
And I'm like, I don't look at it as I'm buying a license. I look at it as I'm donating money for my sport.
See, there's very few people that have that feel, though. I knew you were going to go down that route. That I'm doing my diligence to the DNR and to the wildlife management, but you care about the fisheries and that kind of stuff. But there's people out there, let's say, that don't even buy licenses at all, and they against the law type of thing. But here, you can get 1 or 2 deer, let's say, and then you go into Wisconsin, across the imaginary border. I'm one of those people, right? Across the imaginary border, now you can shoot 10, and it's like, whoa, okay. And we actually had this conversation because he's dealing with that back at home in his hometown, but it's like, oh, I want to. Land management, right? Your deer management, right? That's what you're doing. Well, back in the day, it was. If you say, well, there's more people in this world, right? There's more people. Well, then why does every imaginary border have different regulations?
Well, in your example, I mean, Wisconsin, they've got a population estimate, and I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I do hunt over in Wisconsin as well for whitetails. They've got about 4 times as many as we do. I mean, they do have more. Just their total population is larger. They have more whitetail habitat. So I think it's a really case-by-case situation. But I know you weren't phrasing the question that way, Aaron, but I'd even just I'll throw the question to myself of what does that license get you? We talked about your fee might come up, and it has to happen legislatively. It happened last time in the legislature, which is why when you're buying a license now in March of 2018, you're seeing about a $2 to $3 increase, whatever it was. Yep. I would argue you've got an unbelievable resource, an unbelievable opportunity in Minnesota. You've got stream trout, you've got lake trout, you've got the best muskie fishery, you've got recovering lake sturgeon, panfish opportunities. You've got the state fish, walleye, major walleye factories to travel to. You've got pike, you've got unbelievable bass fishing, as evidenced by what the tournament circuit has done in the state the last few years, national tournaments. Yep. Unbelievable, unparalleled opportunity. It is the #1 inland state as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's different if you go to a coast. You have saltwater opportunities. Right. Yeah, that's going to blow you out of the water.
Yeah, because I just listened to Steve Rinnella's podcast, his newest one, and they were in Florida. And Florida says that they have the most fishermen per capita, but that also includes coastal. And they have the Gulf on one side and the Atlantic on the other. So
yeah, for inland state, this is unparalleled. And what I would say is, if and you guys fish in a lot of other states as I do as well, try finding information in other states. Right. When I've traveled, it's a real challenge. Here, you can go to Lake Finder, the most popular link on the DNR's webpage by far, the most hits. And you can find information on all your lakes. You can find out the latest survey information, historical surveys. It's all at your fingertips. You can use that as a comb. Once you learn and develop some skills to using that, you can find all kinds of information that's useful to you as an angler.
And that's a form of transparency.
It is. That's the beauty of it.
They don't have to put that information out there for us.
We have this unparalleled data set of 60 some years of data where it's standardized. We've used the same gears and the same net set locations, an unbelievable amount of data to compare amongst. There's caveats with it, no doubt about it, but no other state has it. I think there's a lot of other states that wish they had that. I mean, that's the beauty of the land of 10,000 lakes and all that data is we know what has happened over time. We can talk about and observe some of these changes, and now it's on us to try to react to what we're going to do with that information.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I've mentioned before on this podcast, you know, I spent like 7 years in Kentucky living there and growing up and having the opportunity to fish hundreds and hundreds of lakes or thousands of lakes. And I moved to a place like that where there's a handful of lakes and a lot of streams and farm ponds. Like I had a really hard time fishing farm ponds.
Yeah.
Where guys were buying their fish from Tractor Supply. You could buy a largemouth catfish, bluegill, crappie. Nice. They put them in their farm ponds. Yeah, they get super big, but it was a really weird way to fish. I'm used to fishing natural bodies of water, not these square or round impoundments where it was like, where's some structure? Where's this or that? And but I lived in a place where there isn't the same opportunities in it. And you're right about that. Like, how do I find out information on Cumberland?
The info the info is out there. It's at your fingertips.
It's harder to find.
We've got that information. We've got so many different things. We've got wonderful researchers that are publishing a lot of information out there. We've got, I talked about the youth outreach, recruitment, retention, reactivation folks. Fish stocking and propagation. We have hatcheries that your licensed dollars are paying for those to operate. So in places where you might not have those opportunities, they can be supplemented. Just an amazing amount of things. The habitat protection. I mean, I can tell you, it's transparency. You want it. We put it out there. We have a fisheries budgetary oversight committee that looks at how we spend the money. And we code every last little thing to try to maximize the return on investment. We code our time so we know we spent this much time on walleye ponds. We spent this much time on lake survey. I was writing management plans on this. I was training for that. All the different things that we're doing so that we can maximize our return on Dingell-Johnson federal excise taxes. You guys go out, you buy that fishing rod, you put some gas in the motorboat. It's coming 3%? Back. I forget what the exact amount is, but the formula works out to public accesses, landmass, purchased number of licenses that are purchased, and there's a formula out there that's divvying up that pot of money to different states. So we're trying to maximize that return for folks back to Minnesota to fuel the work that we're doing. So really, I would argue, you look at our license fee cost, we're in the median. We're in the middle out of 50 states, but we probably have a top 5 to 10 fishery, and if you weed out the coastal states, for sure we're number one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, going back to that excise tax, I just heard a statistic on that Ranella podcast about he talks a lot about that Dingell-Johnson excise tax, and nationally, it's a national deal. Every year, it's billions of dollars. So a lot of people don't realize that when you go buy a fishing rod, you pay that price. I can't remember the percentage. I want to say it's like 3 or 3.6% of that sticker price that you see there goes into a fund.
Yep.
And that's huge.
And for fish and wildlife, it's Dingell-Johnson. For fisheries, it's Dingell-Johnson. For wildlife, it's Pittman-Robertson. That's probably what Ranella was talking about.
Pittman-Robertson.
And the Pittman-Robertson funds have been flowing over the last 8 years from political things, people buying guns, ammunition. So that's an interesting wrinkle on that side.
But there's I forgot. There's the two. Yeah. The two, but they're excise taxes, and a lot of people don't know about that kind of stuff. They just think that, which is true. When you buy a license, it goes back into the resource. Mm-hmm. But they don't. A lot of people don't know about rods, reels, line, hook. Some of the custom rod builders, they're aware of it. These guys that actually do legitimate custom rod building business, they figure that excise tax into their price as well. Just yeah, it's a good
one
thing.
of our builders in Hutchinson has talked about that. He puts that on the transaction, explains what it is. A lot of people don't know,
Yeah.
so he's coding.
What is
coding
this
that.
tax? And
Well, it's the
whenever
same
you
with-
see like this, an additional tax, especially if you don't know what it's about, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa.
It says
hey.
same with at the resort. You look at it's just
Hospitality.
lodging tax, a hospitality
Hospitality
tax, a
tax,
city
sure.
tax. You're like, what the heck?
I wonder how many people have actually paid attention to their receipt, like when they get it from a fast food joint. I know in this town, there's a little extra tax if you eat in
Oh.
and you don't go through the drive-through.
Yeah, that's just, so to me, the government, that's just a bunch of BS. But can we dive into
Sure.
this, Daddy? Because
Oh,
we're
yeah.
about an hour in, and I'd like to do the giveaway thing. So what we do for the giveaway is basically someone will. You should think about it for the next couple minutes of
Okay.
what they should do, like because we asked about the filming thing for the fish addictions one. I don't want people just to message us. I want something meaningfully. Maybe a favorite memory of you as a kid with your dad. I mean, because what we're looking at here is a 1936 Minnesota fishing laws framed
It's
a law
way cool.
thing, which I will ship to the winner that wins this. But yeah, well, I mean, something that can date back for family, grandpa, something that you can think of maybe that they could message us. But also on this one, I want people to, if they listen to this, I want them to
Do you
subscribe
want
to our
to
YouTube
do like
channel.
a mini essay of some sort? 100 words or less?
I think just don't put a number on it and just let some people just be creative and give us like an essay.
Are you
yeah.
willing to read? Because I know
Yeah.
you're a total visual guy. You don't like reading.
Yeah, send me the videos. Yeah, no,
A video of me reading it.
yeah. So do some sort of maybe write up that they can get it. And I want people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want people to. The Broken Spatula is on there now. We're continually putting videos out, and that's how you show that you care about what we're doing is by hitting that subscribe button. So, for the giveaway, you think about it.
Okay.
Say whatever, and then they can message us on Facebook, and
You
you'll
know
be
what?
in the drawing.
Maybe I'll pass the buck over to Scott, and he can think about that. What would you like to see?
From an average listener or viewer to get a chance to win this, besides liking us on
I think you got
subscribing on YouTube.
I think you guys got the right idea. Give somebody to give you an old fishing memory, because we're looking at something that's a memorial, historical type of document.
Yep.
Give us a good memory. What's your best fishing memory from back in the day?
Best
There-
fishing memory with either like your grandma, grandpa, your dad, your mom,
Childhood
someone,
experience.
Yeah, something when you were younger, back in the day. You know, we're looking at 1936 deal here. What was your favorite memory? Maybe someone was like, yeah, they're old, right? And they're older, and they're like, yeah, back in the day, I remember when it was $1. Like, what was it on here? For residents, your annual license was 50 cents, and your family was $1. It says on
Family.
So
it could be
for-
9. And back in 1936, it wasn't uncommon
Yeah.
to have 8 or 9, 10 brothers and sisters.
Right.
So that's how much. So now that's when I was just talking to you about where does your money go? Come on, there was only $1 back then. What the heck? Could you imagine?
adjust it to what the today's dollars. What would that be equivalent to?
So we're gonna hang one up in the podcast area once we get to finishing this place.
That's coming,
and
people.
we're gonna give this other one away. Send us a Facebook message at Broken Line Podcast. One showing that you subscribed. I want to see that, and on YouTube. And then give me your best favorite memory from when you were a kid.
Right.
And we'll go ahead and pick one, and we'll send the winner a 1936 Minnesota fishing laws
Are they
framed.
Are they?
Brand new deal.
Will you have some consolation prizes there, or how do you want to do?
Oh, so
These are
yeah, I
super.
don't know.
These
I'll
are super
tell
cool
you,
too.
I'll just give you the quick background here on these.
Yeah, and by the way, you donated this to,
Yep, yeah,
to
these
give
are-
away, so we appreciate that.
This
Thank you
isn't
very
from
much.
DNR. This is from me. But these are at a coworker that knew someone that brought in this broadside, and so we made a facsimile here, put it on some cool old-timey looking paper and framed it up. It's just kind of neat to look back and read through. I've seen some of the other older fishing regulations as electronic files. It's just kind of fun to look through. The other thing we have over there is the fish posters. And Deanna, I did bring a few of those along from the office. If folks like those, you can get them at the state fair, get them at your local office. We don't print a lot of them, but they sure are neat. I know I was sharing, Patrick and Aaron and myself are all fathers with kids that we're getting excited and are currently taking our kids out fishing or will be shortly. And the activity at our house is when we catch one of these fish, we check it off. So, whether you do that or you just want to put it up at the fishing cabin or the shack or whatever, enjoy. They're pretty cool posters.
So basically how I would say is we probably have...
I'm going to count them up.
He'll count them, 10, 12 of them, whatever they are. And that's you taking 2 and me taking 1. Why don't we just, if someone wants one, that they can reach out to us and until they're gone.
We have 7.
Because instead of just giving it to someone who doesn't care about it,
Right
if
on.
someone actually is like, hey, we have 7 of them. So if there's 7 people that want to do, basically, I love your ideas, unfold it, frame it, however you want to do it, and then when your daughter or son or your kid catches one of the fish on there, you can cross it off or put a star by it, or she can initial it, he can initial it. You guys can do whatever you want, and you can kind of keep track of your kid as they grow up catching the fish. And you said there's how many species in Minnesota?
The count depends on, we keep getting new invasives that show up, right, or aquarium escapees.
So this isn't
or whatever.
all of the fish on here, but
No,
this
there's
is
just a
majority.
smattering of probably some of the larger bodied fish in Minnesota are there, but we have 168 different fish species, I think was the last count,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure how many are on the poster, maybe 40, 50.
A lot of them are your top game fish.
Right, yep.
So yeah, we have 7 of them. If anyone wants one, first 7, we'll send it out. Maybe we'll send. We have a couple bandanas left too. We can get rid of some of that. But appreciate that. That's awesome. I
Super
can't wait
cool.
to sit and read it and laugh about some of this stuff. Like I see, besides the price, everything influx, right? I mean, that's $1.50. That's ridiculous. Hours for taking fish, zones broken into North Zone, South Zone.
With that $1.50 back in 1936, do you know what you made a month? Your income? You might make $50 a month. But, a bag of flour was a nickel. Things were a lot different back then. I can remember my dad and I were going through some old files, and he found the window sticker. He bought a brand new S10 in 1983. Brand new, off the showroom floor. You want to hear the price?
Let's hear it.
It was $6,800.
Wow.
Tahoe package. Had everything.
Tahoe package, baby.
Yeah. He also found from his very first pickup he bought, I believe it was a 1976, 74 Ford, and that was under $4,000. Brand new. He also told me when he went to college he
But
paid $12 a credit.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, what? He's like, because he asked me when I was going to BSU what I was paying per credit, and I said, well, it depends. You get up into the 900 level classes, you're paying about $1,000 a credit. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, man. He goes, when I was at college at the U of M, fisheries, he was paying $12 a credit.
Wow.
I said, so like a semester costed you like $400.
Yeah, a couple $100.
And he's like, yeah, about that. And I'm like, dude,
Paying for credits what we've paid for books now.
Yeah, $400 in books.
Exactly.
But you think of the world, it's constantly changing. I mean, the price is it's like California, a gallon of milk is differently priced than a gallon of milk here, and that's.
Well, since we're talking about fish laws, can we discuss the new? I think this is good information as we're approaching the open water season. Can you give us a little bit of insight on this new pike regulation?
Yeah, so there's
Because I'm kind of sort of confused a little bit about it.
sure.
And I also, I have the conservation license,
Right.
And I don't know how that plays in effect for me. I guess I can keep 5 pike.
Well, we have. Are either of you waterfall hunters? Okay, so do you remember what a big change it was 6-7 years ago. Commissioner Landwehr's the acting commissioner. He's about to step down. He's appointed by the governor, so he's been Governor Dayton's appointed Minnesota DNR commissioner. He's a former waterfowl biologist, so he did a lot of progressive things in the agency with waterfowl. That's my impression, anyways. And one of the big things was to go to zones, a central, southern, and northern zone for waterfowl hunting. And I heard so many people complaining. But the irony was the complaints were, if you looked around at what people were complaining about, you had some people that said it was too early and you were going to scare all the ducks out. It was too late. Everything was going to be frozen. And I think the comments on it just to me spoke to, well, if you look around at other people's comments, you can get an appreciation that not everyone hunts the same way for the same species or in the same ways or the same locations. Speaks to that diversity, north to south. Like we were talking about yesterday, me coming up here, I'm a banana belter. Coming up to Bemidji where
Yep.
You'll be driving on ice for at least 2 or 3 more weeks, and depending on what the temperatures do in the southern part of the state, who knows? Lakes could be opening up in a few more weeks. There's a huge lot of north to south latitude in this state, and there's a huge shift. And we talked about this a little bit. In a gradient from southwest to northeast when it comes to the geology, soil type. So we get different growing conditions, different biomes, and that affects how we manage these resources. Now, in the case of waterfowl, that was that shift to give people more hunting opportunities. I'd like folks to frame this northern pike management change the same way. We have different types of lakes in different parts of the state. Absolutely. In the southern part of the state, we've got fast-growing fish, and we don't have the super abundant fish down there because in a lot of cases we've lost their spawning habitat, connected wetlands, right? Lots of wetlands have been draining the agricultural parts of Minnesota. Those are important for northern pike. We've lost, some lakes are so turbid and eutrophic that we don't have, meaning they're really green and not a lot of plant growth. We don't have that plant growth that would be a substrate for where a pike could lay eggs for in-lake reproduction. So you don't see a lot of very abundant pike populations in southern Minnesota. Then when you start heading to the northern parts of the state, it's hammer handle city, right? You can get out in places and you can't leave a minnow on a hook unattended because it's going to get smoked by some little hammer handle. That's the case in a big chunk of the state. And then if you get up into the northeast, we have places that don't see a lot of fishing pressure, deep, cool, Canadian shield, oligotrophic, type of lakes. That's where we see they have tulipies, they have really big pike in that area. So it was a little bit difficult to figure out where do you draw the lines exactly. After some contention, that was the approach that was settled in on. And I'll give folks credit within the agency and one of the retirees, Jim Lilienthal, who went to the roundtable as a citizen after his retirement, talked about we need to do something about northern pike management in the state because we're going to be overrun with hammer handle pike that impact our perch, that impact our walleye stocking efforts with fingerlings or fry.
It can trickle down even to impacting the attitudes of anglers.
Absolutely, it's top down control. It's the predator setting the table for how the whole lake sets up. So
because I've even heard guys around here saying, "Man, these pike are almost an invasive species. They're almost a nuisance."
They can be, at times. You bet.
Yeah.
So that's the approach. So in the southern zone, you can keep 2 fish. They need to be at least 24 inches. In the north central zone, which is actually most of the landmass in this new change that's coming up here, that is going to be a 10-fish bag. Fish between 22 and 26 inches are protected, and you can have no more of those 10 fish be over 26 inches. So it gives you some opportunities to harvest smaller size fish, and the idea is to move the needle to get to a little bit larger size fish in the south zone, in the north central zone, and then in the northeast to sort of protect what you already have. You've got some really nice large size fish. Do we have a copy of the fishing regulations?
We do, actually. I believe it's up here. I've seen it.
I don't know.
I know I left the copy in the truck, but it's got the northeast zone reg.
Dude, I'm looking at that map on there. Now, did Minnesota have land above? And then did we lose land?
Yeah, it's some creative map drawing ability.
Is that supposed to be? Is that supposed to be the Northwest?
Someone didn't do so good with their arrowhead drawing there. No,
that's supposed to be the Northwest angle. I'm not really sure.
I thought I saw the reg book, but I don't know where.
I believe it's what is it? you can't take a fish over 30 inches and it's 2 fish. I got to double check. It's the reason I'm not acutely familiar with the Northeast is it's not in my management area. I should know the zone. I do fish in that area when I take vacation, but I don't harvest pike, so I'll have to double check what the new Northeast zone reg will be for pike.
Talking about, you just said harvest pike. Now, in this zone where you can take 10 of these smaller fish, as part of my deal in the fishing industry is promoting the sport, and I think along with that, with this new regulation, I've been thinking about this, Aaron. I enjoy eating pike. I think they're a good tasting fish, but a lot of people don't know how to deal with them. If
you mix those together with, I don't like the pickling. I know a lot of people love northern pickling.
Yeah, I'm
but
not a
if you
pickler.
Just mix that with bluegills, and this
Yeah,
might
but
be
the
a
problem
shame
is
to bluegill
if people don't know how to deal with the Y bones. And I think
it's 2018 is what I'm saying. And, I'm 26 years old, and maybe it's because I've had the outdoor industry so close to me my whole life. But I feel like I've lived here in Minnesota for 15, 16 years. Maybe when I first got to Minnesota, I was like, oh, yeah, that's a challenge. And then a summer went by, and 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 et cetera. And if you don't know how to clean that, maybe watch some YouTube videos, practice, and you'll get it, because it's not very difficult.
Can I be totally honest with you?
Kick it. Do it. Sorry, I cut you off.
I've tried just about every method. I've sat there in my kitchen with the iPad propped up. Okay, I got this YouTube, and it takes a lot of practice to clean a northern pike efficiently and
are you
bone-free.
Efficiently is a key word, because you're still getting.
But I still hear it like I don't keep pike because I'm not good at getting the bones out,
and that's almost the way.
And I think for this thing to be successful, I think there needs to be a lot more resources. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there now, but I think people should key in on really learning how to clean and eat these smaller pike.
And there has been a communication plan with this a little bit. I know Linder Media helped out with putting some information out on this change to zones, and there has been talk about, there needs to be some public education. How do you prepare those fish? If we're encouraging folks to harvest smaller size pike, how do you remove the Y bones, that sort of thing? So you are going to see some of that, especially as we ramp up to fishing opener. Folks are going to be seeing this change. It's alluded to on the front of the fishing regulations. It's highlighted. You are going to see some of that education effort, because I think a lot of folks, even though it's been discussed, it's been in the legislature, it's been out in outdoors media a little bit, folks are still probably missing that message. And I did double check. Yes, it's 2 pike in the Northeast zone, and 30 to 40 inches is protected. If you do catch one of those great big over 40-inch fish, you can harvest it if you want to do a trophy or that sort of thing.
Right.
In 2018, I feel like the people what you just said right there is, a lot of people aren't going to want to catch or keep northern pike, because I'm not going to say they're too lazy not to learn, or it's too difficult for them to. It's hard. I guess since you're a pan fisherman, I guess I get it, because I would say for you, it's hard for me to believe that you don't keep northern. But if you're not,
I do, but I'm not proud of what I've butchered up. It's pretty rough looking, and it's just I need to practice it.
That would be something since when we do video stuff, we should figure out about finding someone that can just absolutely teach you the easiest way, and we film it and we put it out.
That's what I'm talking about.
And share
let's get some education out there. I think that's part of what we do. We try to educate people with our Fish Addictions TV show, and me personally, on my own YouTube stuff and whatnot. I try to promote the sport, and I think this is just as important as promoting selective harvest, how to clean and take care of your fish and how to consume them.
Well, one thing's for sure, the status quo wasn't working. It was time to make a change. I think the 3 fish statewide reg had been in place for 40, 50, 60 years unchanged. So it's time to try something a little bit different, at least make an attempt. And you're still providing opportunities. You're getting larger sized fish, the opportunity for larger sized fish. You're protecting large sized fish, and you're giving folks an opportunity to harvest. And we had support for this from the Dark House Spears. You got to give them credit. Now, in the North Central Zone, they are allowed a oopsie fish that is not 22 to 26. But I mean, to get everybody on the same page, you have to understand, and this goes for all natural resource management, and northern pike is a case in point, because we have folks that view them as a trash fish. We have folks that view them as a food fish. We have folks that view them as a trophy fish. We have some love them, some hate them. So everybody's got a different opinion about them. So to get everybody at the table and to have so little, we didn't get a lot of opposition on this. It was unanimously passed in the legislature before.
It was very clear.
Yeah,
hey,
it's surprising to have that amount of
awesome.
support for it. So we're hopeful with it, and I think it's going to take some level of education, and folks are going to have to be willing to adapt to change.
Awesome. Well, since we're talking about limits, let's get into it. I've been now you're going to be heading south on Sunday, and you're going to have an opportunity to fish some burbot. So, and we're right now, the burbot around here they're dialed in. They're going off the chain. I got buddies that are going out and they're getting, 20, 30 fish now a night. Now, almost everybody I know is going out there. They're just getting their fun pictures for them, letting them go. There are some people that are keeping them. There's videos out there. Matt Brewer, Jason Rylander, they've done videos on how to clean and eat them, which is smart because they are an excellent fish to eat.
Eel pot mac and cheese.
At the same time, as I got into burbot fishing here, I'm just that kind of dude. Like, okay, this is super cool, unique thing. It also terrifies me that there is no limit on these things. Mm-hmm. And it's really, in the last 5 or 6 years, it's really gained and picked up popularity. Fish Addictions has done 2 shows on it. Other fishing shows have done shows on it. It's social media.
A lot of social
all
media
over
this
the
year.
place.
Those YouTube fishermen stars have been doing stuff on it too.
And
so
it gets a lot of attention, especially from people outside of Minnesota, or even people in Minnesota. Like, they're fascinated by them. I don't know if you can answer it or not, but is it being talked about?
Yeah, we're paying attention to a lot of different fish species. We just had a meeting that we do every 2 years ago. We call it the Fisheries Academy, bring all the fisheries employees together. We go up to Camp Ripley, and it's a chance to learn what your colleagues are working on. It's the only time you get to see all those people together. A lot of cross-pollination, right?
Dude, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Right. Hide out in the closet and just be like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So no, it's great. And I saw a talk there, and if we, we're encouraged to attend and be part of the professional society of the Minnesota chapter of the American Fisheries Society and the state and the national chapter. So you've got practicing professionals that give presentations, and we talk about these issues. A couple of the great talks that I saw was on buffalo aging. What do we know about buffalo? Because they are a commercial fish species, popular with
everybody there. He's talking about the big mouth,
smallmouth and bigmouth buffalo.
Smallmouth and big mouth. Okay.
And we're talking about what do we know? What do we still need to learn about this fish species? It's a native fish species. It's a part of our fish community. It may not be popular with anglers, probably because it's mainly planktivorous. But
I giggle because that's my life.
Yeah, I mean it's so we're trying to learn more about these burbot and tulaby, also called cisco, also called lake herring. 3 different common names. Burbot, eel pout, all these different common names. A couple of fish species that we're paying very close attention to. I'll start with the ciscos, tulaby. We're paying attention to what's happening in watersheds, actually, believe it or not, because we know that if we have intact forested watersheds, we've got great protection and preservation around that lake. That lake's probably going to stay in good shape. We're not going to see a bunch of development, logging, changes to the land use. And that land use acts as a sponge. What we do on the land affects what happens in the water. So it's been a focus to really focus on upland habitat around these lakes. Where can we preserve these deep, cool, cold water lakes so that there will always be a history and there will be a future for these tulaby, because they're so important for as a prey item, as driving the food chain.
So it starts with the land around the lake.
It does. What we do on the landscape affects what kind of water we have. Yep. So that's been a push, sort of a preservationist theory, right? We an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. Instead of waiting, like our southern lakes, where we've got completely changed land systems, watersheds around these lakes, let's be proactive. And that's been a way to bring everyone to the table to work together with selective cutting for forestry, for development around lakes. Because obviously we want folks to be able, the counties to develop the lakes, to be able to have homes on there. We want responsible development. We want our lakes, because that's the gem for northern Minnesota. Come up to these lakes that that are beautiful and have these great fishing opportunities, but let's keep them in place. So it's a way to sort of work together with the counties, foresters, really just bring everybody to the table. I use that as an example because I would say it's one of those fringe fish species. Some folks fish for them seasonally, take them home, smoke them.
My best friend in Side Lake, he does the netting.
Yeah, you can get a fall netting permit.
Yep.
And to your specific question about burbot, that's another one that we're concerned about. What I didn't say about the Cisco or the Tullibee is that they are a sensitive fish species, a canary in the coal mine for climate change.
Yes.
And burbot is in the same thing. We are looking at two different fish species that are on the southern edge of their range. So as things warm up, they can get into situations in the summer where it gets too warm for them. When we've got lakes
that actually happened on a lake south of town. It got with burbot. It summer killed, and people are like, what? They all know about winter kill,
and summer kill.
A bunch of burbot wound up dead on Garfield Lake.
I remember seeing it when I worked on Leech Lake for a summer, where we had summer kill, and it's a wind mixed lake that doesn't get all that deep. It's pretty shallow for a burbot lake, but I mean, it happens. If it gets too warm, we get a long stretch of hot weather, you can have a summer kill. So we are paying attention because we know that those two fish species are sensitive. We see increasing, in pockets, increasing fishing pressure on them. We do see more harvest. We do see more folks that in the creels on the large lakes, like a Lake of the Woods or a Mille Lacs or Leech or Winnie or wherever, there are more people that are harvesting those burbot. And so the question comes, what happens? And at this conference, the Training Academy a couple weeks ago, the question was asked, and our fisheries chief did say, yes, we're looking into this. We're looking into, with a conservation interest, might there be something we would need to do? So it's too early for me to speculate on that, what that might be, if it's a bag limit, if it's a season, if it's some other regulation, but those are the tools in the toolbox.
To me, it seems like Cisco's and that kind of stuff is bait for northern, for tip-ups. Like, that's what I would think. So, like, catching them,
yeah,
I don't see many.
Until you've had one out of the smoker.
Yeah, but how? Okay, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I guess maybe I've seen 30 on the ice at 10 years. I mean, okay, so you have one in your smoker, but no one's going around jumping up and down going, woo, had one at the smoker. Like burbot, though, I like, cod. I like codfish. I mean, and this is right there. I mean, that's what that is. And having that, it's delicious. It's ugly. It's slimy. It's gross. But I would almost say in some instances, I'd rather have eel pout than some fish. Let's go with all of saltwater fish. Just get rid of that because I don't like saltwater fish, eating-wise. But walleye, bluegill, pike, all that good stuff. But I could have eel pout over saltwater stuff all day. Yeah. And, we did the eel pout mac and cheese last year. And this, sneak peek for that, we're going to hopefully have Tim come and do eel pout tacos or burbot tacos. And maybe I'm hungry right now. But
you're starting to salivate already.
Good.
But that's exactly why I brought this question up, is because a guy... once you get taste for that and you realize there's
then you
no
can
limit.
Overpower it.
Right.
Like, okay, I'm going to put on a burbot feed because there's no limit. I can literally go out there and try to fill half of a truck bed.
Right.
And I'd hate to see that happen. And I'm not trying to throw the fisheries or our Department of Natural Resources under the bus, but I'd like to see something before it's now we have to fix it.
Right.
And that's good to hear that you guys have been talking about that and are aware of the popularity.
And
since walleye fishing has stopped, my news feed has been full of, I would say, for fishing wise, it's 80% burbot.
Yeah.
And that makes
and
you
it goes
question.
back to the day when I was younger in high school, we used to go fish Winnie for perch when it was 100.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. And I also remember going there with 3 other guys. And the one guy said, we're not leaving until we all have our limits. And I said, I will stay here, but I'm going to keep my 20 perch because that's more than what I need. You can have my other 80, but I'm not helping you clean them. That's ridiculous. And you know what? We left there with 300 perch. I cleaned my 20, and his dad was so pissed. He cleaned perch for 4 hours. This is pre-electric knife. This is old Rapala Keep Sharpener. Each fish individually, and he learned a lesson. But that kind of mentality, I'll never forget that story. And when I see there's no limit or there's 100, it's like.
And it speaks to, you and I fished a little bit here, and it speaks to perceptions, right? How do we perceive? And people are concerned about, how do we value fish? I mean, it's such a cultural, social thing, and people look at whether it's a rock bass or it's a burbot or it's a buffalo or a bowfin, whatever it might be, and they just sheephead that it makes them cringe. And it's like, they all have a value. They're all native fish. They're all part of the ecosystem. They play a role. We've got these silly ideas that they're bad or something, or that that they're not important. But that
and
really
to you,
isn't the
that's
case.
everything because you love those weird fish.
Well, I
That's
feel
our pet,
I have
by the way.
a pretty
name's
good
Roger.
grasp. A layman's. What is that thing?
It's a spider.
It's a daddy long legs.
Wow.
It's our pet.
It's distractions. We're all like little kids. Stop talking. Let's play with the bug.
We should be out playing in the mud
But
because
no,
it's muddy out.
I feel I have a relatively good layman's grasp on the relationships that take place under the water. We talked about like it kind of makes me nervous if burbot start disappearing and their numbers get way thin. What's going to happen? Well, I have an inclination that we're going to see a rise in stunted perch. We're going to see more crayfish. And what do crayfish do? They eat bugs and plants, and
Those are the ecosystem services that those fish provide.
yeah,
I mean,
everything in my mind, everything's a chain link. And when you break one of those, now you don't have a whole chain, and it doesn't work.
I was talking to him the other day about, let's just say you believe in God or you don't believe in God or you believe in whoever put this stuff here or however it got here. Everything that's here, that's natural. Like, I'm going to say tobacco or I'm going to say tomatoes or whatever. Fresh fruits, trees, plums, the whole works, animals, deer, fish. Everything was here for a reason and here for us to survive. We didn't have Burger King back in the day and all that good stuff. Like it's all here for you to survive. So I agree with what he's saying about if you abuse it or don't abuse it. There's two different ways you can go in the outdoor industry. You can abuse the system or you can do it properly. And doing it properly, you're there by doing the land management and the animal management, and obviously. Why was this fish naturally put naturally in this lake? Well, it was there for a reason, and that's why this plant is there for a reason, et cetera, et cetera.
And going, to comment on that, like going back, back in the day, back in the day, there wasn't food opportunities every 6 miles on the road.
Yeah,
there wasn't.
Burger King, McDonald's.
Right.
Taco
I live
Bell.
right downtown, and you were like, dude. I said, yeah, there's a great place to eat. There's a great place to eat. There's a great place to eat. Well, back in the day, it was. There's a great place to eat. It's Lake Bemidji, or it's Turtle River in the woods.
Yeah.
Let's go kill something.
Right.
Tonight you can walk from his apartment building to the bar in like 45 seconds.
Right. To great food.
Good food. Yeah. What's your take on bow fishing game fish?
bow fishing game fish. Well, I mean, I don't know.
It's like deer hunting, right? I mean, it's.
Yeah, I mean it. So the challenge with hook and line is, you have to get that fish to bite. You have to get that fish to commit.
That's
and
why.
bite.
Yeah, that's why I compared it to like deer hunting, because that deer comes in, and you're not trying to get it to bite on a piece of vegetable.
No, I came up in a family that we didn't do a lot of fishing, but my dad did a little bit of dark house spearing. My grandpa, and we were talking about this earlier, spending time doing that. There's folks that are critical of that, and I say, well, because you don't have to get them to bite, you just have to get them to come in. Well, it still is a challenge. You got this little small hole that you got to time everything right and drop it or throw it otherwise and hit the fish. And it's participated. It's a niche sport. There's not a lot of folks that participate. That's true of bow fishing as well. I think the concern there would be that's a passive way of harvesting. You're sitting over a spot. Bow fishing is active. You put it in gear, you move around, you're finding fish. So it'd be a lot easier to exploit game fish that way. I think the setup for underutilized or rough fish is probably the right is the right way. Are there places you could do it? Maybe, but I'm not. And then you've got the social question too: is how accepting are other anglers going to be? I suspect probably not very.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still getting food for your family to survive. You're still paying your licenses to go do it. You're still paying for your boat license. You're still doing all that stuff.
But Aaron, the whole argument for getting food for your family to survive is void.
It's void.
It is void.
To the people
it's void.
that
It's
don't
2018,
care
dude.
about it.
You can go to McDonald's and buy six cheeseburgers for $6.
And that's the wrong way to think of it, is what I'm trying to say.
But we got to think like now. Because the back in the day isn't here anymore.
You got to tell that to a lot of political people.
Well, I'm just
Trump's
saying.
here. It's done. Stop complaining about it. It is what it is.
That's just it. Like I just said, we can go every 6 miles and you can stop and get something to eat.
But what about the kids that are protesting?
I have yet to meet a family that solely survives on the food that they get in the woods. If they're out there, we haven't made contact with them.
That's a wrong thing because there's like Amish people and stuff.
They have
I'm not
farms.
saying they solely live off the land, and there's lots of people.
No, I'm not talking about living off I'm talking about what you're talking about is I need deer and fish to feed my family. That translates to we don't go to town. We don't buy groceries.
I'm going to disagree because there's a lot of people that live off the land, and they literally are like in the Stone Age, right? I mean, we even see stupid TV shows of it, whether it's real or not. There's people out there that are living in the Stone Age, and they literally are.
But you
there
can
are
do that
some,
within
but
these
regulations. I'd probably respectfully disagree that there's a lot. There's some.
Oh, there's not a whole lot, but there's plenty that you
coming
know
from a
it's
guy
not
that grew up on
real.
a farm. I can tell you, we have the cheapest food in the world. What you pay as a percentage of your income or the money that you have to spend is tiny. Like we have the cheapest food in the world in America.
Let's just go to Africa. Do you think they go to McDonald's all the time, or are they living off the land?
No, they're living off the land. But that's a developing country. We're a developed country. I don't see us going
but
now.
I'm just making the point that there's plenty of people that live off, and they don't have rules of how many monkeys they can shoot and kill, right? Now, just because our land is developed, I don't care about a Burger King or McDonald's. I do actually like that deer venison that's living right outside my door. And I feel like I'm forced into the whole grocery store, McDonald's, Burger King, when I don't want to.
I think the crux of it is something that Patrick and I were talking about. The crux of it is how many fish do you really need? How many fish do you need to have a meal? And I think you can still have a lot of harvest opportunities in the current. I know I'm looking at the 1936 regs, but in the current 2018 regs, you still have a ton of harvest opportunities for fish.
Absolutely.
Even with a closed season right now, you could go out. You could catch a lot of fish. If you wanted to eat entirely fish and stay within the legal law, I think you could do it.
Yeah, I think those numbers are totally viable.
No, the amount of what you can take, people can survive off like crazy. But I'm just talking bow fishing. You can spear a northern. Why can't you bow fish a northern? And is it because you can travel to them? Is it? I don't know. But again, then it comes down to the I enjoy both, but same with him. He'd rather catch it on a rod and reel.
And I've told
like
you
that mixed
if you
hunting.
gave me the opportunity to bow fish,
I'd love
I
to
would
buy
totally
a boat.
do it. But I'd also be the guy to I'm gonna.
I mean, I've gone
one.
past 30-plus-inch walleye 4 feet from the boat, and I did not shoot them because I'm following the laws.
Sure. Well, it gives you a bit of just a little bit of dialogue that we had there. It gives you it's a perfect example of natural resource management is messy. It's complicated. It's people have different opinions about how things should be done, and it's something that's near and dear to a lot of people, especially in this state, especially in this community. And that's
reasons why there's laws, there's fines, there's fees, there's people like you guys working your butt off because there's people that think his way, and there's people that think different way, and there's people that think, well, why can't I just shoot a walleye?
And I think too, and I've probably said it a couple times already, but I do think that one of the beautiful things is we do cater to all those different types of folks. Folks have opportunities to harvest fish. Folks have chances at trophy fish. Folks have a diversity of options for fishing, bow fishing, dark house spearing. There's a little bit of everything. I've seen it really move to more opportunity. We've opened up catch and release trout seasons, and we've seen more people buy trout stamps as a result.
There's a new catch and release bass season.
Catch and release bass season, night bow fishing coming on board, and early bow fishing season. We've expanded opportunities, and it's been pretty well embraced. And so long as you don't see a negative side of it, you'll probably continue to see those.
I have a confession. When I was a kid, I was a hardcore bass angler. I'd go out on opener, and I would throw a spinnerbait for pike. In actuality, I'm bass fishing because it was some of the best bass fishing you could experience. And I always thought that was kind of a silly thing, but I understand it. People sometimes want to have a tendency to catch something and harvest it. It's the same thing. Like back when I was growing up, I'm looking at that. There's 1936. There's a spearing regulation. I think that's really fascinating because spearing pike is still a thing today. I believe it's a dying art. A lot less people are doing it. Growing up, I could look out on big sturgeon, and 100% of the houses you saw out there were dark houses.
Spears, yeah.
And I grew up doing it. It was super fun. I learned a lot about fishing and about fish behavior and all that kind of stuff. But I was taught. Let's pass on that one. He's not very big, or let's take that one. That's a big one, but then let's get a couple smaller ones. I think a lot of anglers do practice
selective harvest.
Some selective harvest, and I also wanted to say, not catch and release. 100% catch and release isn't always a good thing either.
No.
In Fisherman does a pretty good job of promoting selective harvest.
Mm-hmm. There are cases where you're exactly right, where we've actually observed it on special reg waters where we don't have enough harvest. Growth slows down. There's too many fish in the system.
It's a wicked game we dance in fish and game. You think you have the right answer, and there is no right answer.
Oh, and that's part of the agency's push. Is I think we've got to be open and transparent about what are the outcomes. There's positive outcomes with any management change, but there can be negatives that come with it too, and you have to balance that out, or you have to at least talk about the caveats. What could go wrong? Because so much of what we do, it's at the whim of Mother Nature. What is the weather going to do for a cold-blooded or animal? What is she's
the ultimate factor in the whole game.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could predict it. It's a science. It's fishery science, but boy, is it an art too, because it's so much of it that it's not a cookbook recipe. You have a lot of things out of your control. It's just trying to harness what you do know and do the best you can.
I think of what you guys do almost in a sense of what policemen do, right? If there was no police, the world would go havoc. It would go negative. There would be crashes, problems, etc. For the you guys stocking fish, making sure that this disease isn't in this lake, making sure people are obeying these laws. If there wasn't that, just think of how you are when you was talking about the chain link to all the animals and the pieces that are in that lake specifically. It's all chain linked. You're the top chain link. You're the dude sitting up on top of the boat. Now, I've actually, last summer I saw they were shocking fish at night. They were coming through, and I was standing up there because they had the bow fishing lights, and I was like, someone bow fishing out on my lake? Like, what the heck? That's not something I see every day. Yeah. And then they came by the resort, and I was like, oh, they're shocking the lake.
Sampling fish.
Yeah, and I was like, that's cool. And that kind of wanted to run down and jump on the boat with them for an hour,
Right on.
But we appreciate what you do and learning and listening and all that stuff, because it is something that everyone in the fishing industry, Ice Fishing Minnesota, all the different pages, the TV, the commercials, all that good stuff, everyone on social media, anyone that just fishes in general, you are the person that kind of
right
is at the top of it all.
And I think it's a partnership, because you can't just do it without one or the other. I think the people are part of it. I've stressed that a little bit, but Patrick and I have talked, and we've talked about some of the conflicts. I've shared a few with him, when we've been chatting this weekend, and a lot of folks, it's better to have understanding, to try to learn what each side, what the issues are, and try to come together, because at the end of the day, we've got more in common than we have differences. We all kind of want the same thing. We want good fishing and good fisheries. Yeah. We might disagree about certain parts of it, but try to get people on the same page.
And we at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about it's a give or take on 50-50 on how much you see interaction from the average people. And if I would say if there's one thing out of this talking to you, it would be to try to get more people involved with communicating with people like you. You said the open door policy, etc. It's not all about sometimes just this being on Facebook and typing. It might be more of contacting someone like you to give input. And I think for you, I think you should figure out about doing the roundtable deal. And if you got a person like this sitting here,
well, as soon as he mentioned
other
that,
people,
what was
I
it,
think
the
you could do it.
anglers,
Avid Anglers group.
Avid Anglers, I'm like, it would be kind of neat to have some sort of fisherman's club saying, all right, guys, we're out here a lot. Let's help out our fisheries department. Let's give them some information. A lot of these guys spend time on the water, but a lot of these guys spend more time in the office. Let's help. Let's work together. Hey, this is what I'm observing on this lake. I just thought I'd bring this to your attention.
Sure.
We should almost make a business, an outdoor group, something LLC, whatever, but outdoor group here in the Bemidji area that does ties with the DNR and in the outdoor
club.
industry with fishing, podcasts, getting kids involved in fishing things, or getting kids at the archery thing, or just like when we were talking earlier about starting a high school fishing league, and it's kind of all under an umbrella type of. Yeah. And even if it doesn't, there's things like you should do the roundtable thing. I want to really try to get kids involved with a high school league here.
When we were out fishing today, we were having fun, and I said, when I was younger, I wanted to be a professional bass angler. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to catch bass and cash checks, and be on magazine covers and talk about bass fishing. As I sit here today, I still follow the Bassmaster Classic Tour and all that kind of stuff. But as I sit here today, in the angling I'm doing, in the way things have changed, I told Scott, I said, I just want to showcase that there's all kinds of awesome opportunities at learning through doing something different, stepping outside the box, fishing for other things. Last night we were talking about sheep's head. We watched my video of me catching this monster sheep's head on 4-pound test on purpose, and I said I wanted to record this, one, to preserve the memory because it was pretty awesome, and two, to show people like, hey man, this kind of stuff is fun. So if you're struggling, it's okay to pull out of your back pocket. All right, walleyes ain't going today, but I know there's a hot trophy bullhead bite, and it may sound kind of weird to say hot trophy bullhead bite, but once you learn about these fish, there are opportunities to catch giant fish. They just are painted a little bit different. And that's happened with burbot. But when I was a kid, they used to leave them lay out on the ice on Lake of the Woods. Now, you go and people are talking about how beautiful they are that come out of these lakes, and they're cool looking. And they appreciate them. When 20 years ago, I was like, kill it. We talked about dogfish and how I just heard the other day, because I was talking about dogfish, like, oh yeah, you're supposed to kill those things still, aren't you? When you catch them, I'm like, nope, you can't do that, dude.
Yeah, there's folks that bring that up a lot. I can remember fishing off of a pier one time. The guy catches a dogfish, throws it on shore, and I asked him, hey, you planning to do something with that? Oh, no, you're supposed to throw those all on shore. It's like, I can remember a friend of mine in college that was fighting with me over this topic, and it's like, no, it's called wanton waste, man. You gotta immediately, if you're not going to utilize it, you got to immediately return these fish to the water. But there was a rule on the books at one point to leave common carp on shore, but you can't manage a K-selected species that's going to lay thousands, millions of eggs everywhere, and you think that by taking one of them out, you're going to have an impact. Plus, you just make a stinky mess for the next guy that wants to come over and fish. So. Yeah,
and you're drawn. And I think part of that not throwing burbot out on the ice was it was starting to draw out fox, coyotes. We were getting birds of prey coming out to the lakes, and whenever you start getting wild animals intermixing with human activity, that's never a good thing too. So I think that was another part of that whole. All right, we got to stop this.
Right.
It's a interesting dynamic, that's for sure.
If you could tell one person something about possibly something that they would be interested in what you do, what would it be?
If I could,
Like, what's the most important thing from your shoes that you could tell the average fisherman?
oh man, no, that's a good question.
That is
Because there's a lot of things you could say.
But it's like if you could say one thing that's you want to be important for someone to listen. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I would just say broadly to try to get them to, it depends if you're asking from the agency perspective as an angler.
from someone in your shoes that works in what you do.
So, yeah, it would be like your perspective.
So, yeah.
Probably that. I've said it earlier that we're kind of all in this together. Maybe I'm being overly sensitive to the folks that are so critical, but a lot of folks that the DNR is their favorite whipping boy. You know, it's easy to pick on them, but at the end of the day, and I'm seeing this at a federal level. I think that a lot of natural resource organizations are coming under fire because the expectations for them are expanding, their workforce is shrinking, and they're painted as outsiders. Like, it's easy to talk smack about the DNR because we don't know who they are. But if I'm the guy living next door to you that helped shovel your driveway and we talk fishing, or I'm in your church, or we're in the basketball league together, or whatever it might be, or we're throwing darts downtown, I mean, you get to know that person.
Yeah.
You start to recognize their legitimacy, you build rapport, and then you have a good thing going. And I think that's kind of lost in some places. It's like the agency's viewed as the devil. Like there's people that honestly believe you're trying to screw over their fishing. It's like, no, a lot of us are anglers. We're trying to make it pretty darn good. So.
We're trying to make it better than it already is. And
right. So I guess that would be maybe one thing. You could answer that a lot of different ways. It just depends what the message of the month is.
That was a great answer.
The message of the month.
That is a great answer, and I think a lot of it too is anglers and outdoorsmen, hunters are very passionate people. They fear change. They don't like to see change, but yet at the same time they want change.
And change is always coming. I mean, you guys see it from the industry side. We see it on the lake side. Like, things are changing a lot. I mean, what is a reasonable expectations? Expectation management is a huge part of what we do. I can remember the analogy that I used was going down to Mexico and having fish tacos, and they're like the best. And you being foodies will appreciate this. It's like the best fish tacos I ever had, right? And then I came
Corn
back.
Tortilla.
Yes, know, like the best pico. It was awesome. And then I came back and I went to some,
Taco Bell.
Joe Dirt restaurant and ordered fish tacos, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are mushy, disgusting, flat, coleslaw, nasty. This is awful. Well, it's the same thing when you go on a fishing trip, right? Expectations are important. If you are expecting that it's always going to be the time that you hammered the snot out of them and caught all these fish, you are going to be so disappointed. It's like, DNR's doing a terrible job, can't catch any fish. If that's the way that you feel, you're going to be disappointed. That kind of put a light on for me, like, when it comes to food, I got to be the same way. It's not always going to be the best of the best. So set your expectations somewhat realistically.
Right,
now
buddy?
I want tacos.
This guy, I had this conversation with Aaron a while back.
Expectations?
About expectations.
My expectations, what we're talking about, is in the food industry.
It's way up there. Doesn't matter what place it is.
Yep, doesn't matter how dinky or ranky
I'm
this
just
place
the opposite.
is.
I roll at McDonald's. My expectations are at the all-time low, so I'm never disappointed.
I think you guys have talked about this with fish addictions, is when you roll into some place, you got to have a range of expectations. I'm not saying you have to set the bar super low, but you do need to realize that it's still fishing at the end of the day. Some days you're going to work for them. Some days you're going to cut the first hole, and they're going to be right there.
Yeah. And those are the days we remember. And I've talked about that on a podcast about how important it is to be unsuccessful. Everybody remembers successful days. You don't learn from successful days.
No.
You're just like, I hammered him. Well, what'd you do? I don't know, man. We just got on him and we hammered him. Well, there's lessons to be learned in that.
Yeah, you learn from
unsuccessful
the losses.
days. What did I do wrong? You start questioning everything.
We've talked about that in podcasts before on why that's important to have that. But do you have any more questions for him?
Oh, I told you this could go on for days, but we also are hungry.
Because we're at officially the
And he
longest
wants to
podcast
go
we've ever
chase
done.
giant
It
bluegill.
feels like nothing, just like you said it would.
Yeah, it feels like you've been sitting here for 10 minutes, right?
Right.
Go
The only
chase
thing
some
I'd
bluegills.
like to do, if we're going to have 8 more minutes of this, meaning not 15 but 8, tell me about you do writing in the outdoors.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So you're a writer that also is heavily positioned in the outdoor industry with what your job is.
Right. So my background, it goes beyond. I talked about being a fish geek. You heard me talk about my upbringing. I kept fish as a kid. So all of a sudden you go into ichthyology class and you know all the fins and you know everything because you've been keeping fish in tanks. You've been fishing like a fool. You were digging into all this, anything that you could get your hands on that was fishing, fish related. And so it kind of gave you a leg up. I was a senior in college, my senior year as an undergrad, when I found out about a writing position that was open in Hutchinson, around the area that I'm locally from, and sent in a couple samples. They ran with it, and I wasn't looking for this opportunity, but all of a sudden it came to me to become an outdoor writer. So it was a on-the-job sort of training thing where you learn to write effectively and write to the public, write in outdoor media. From there, it grew. Freelance opportunities. Sitting here today, I'm writing for the St. Cloud Times, the Mankato Free Press, the Hutchinson Leader, and then I freelance a fair amount, a few magazines.
You ever need photos, let me know.
Yeah, we were talking. Well, we'll talk about that afterward. But yeah, and that's been fun. And you're right; it's a way to get hooked into the outdoor industry. I got associated with Clam Outdoors, and a friend of mine, Matt Johnson, that's the pro staff manager there. We go back a ways, and he invited me on board. And what a great way to network and do what you guys talk about, which is expose people to fishing and how much passion and love you have for it, and get those people recruited. Because, like we just got done saying, that's critically important to a rising tide lifts all boats. We need to sell fishing licenses. We need folks that buy fishing products. We need to pass this heritage element of who we are as a people and a culture on. So that's been fun to dovetail my personal and professional interests together, and having the support of supervisor and the DNR's been good with that, and it's kind of fun. And I hope to continue to do more of it, but I've also got that role of being a father, which you guys understand as well, that having fun with that, taking the kids out, spending some of that free time. I've been pretty much a weekend warrior because I commute to my job and come back, but it's been fun to travel around, fish different places. And, the big one is, I kind of ice fish all over, fly fish occasionally. And the one thing I probably will do as we get into the summer months, and I never anticipated this, but when I moved, I live in New Prague. When I moved into New Prague, the thing to do I found was you're by the Minnesota River. You have to go and do the opportunity that's in your backyard. So if you're in southwest Minnesota, you hunt pheasants. If you're in northeast Minnesota, you probably look for moose sheds. If you're in southeast Minnesota, you're probably a trout angler. Well, being that close to the Minnesota River, the attraction was to go for catfish. So started off with very little knowledge of catfish, and now I'm about that in the summer. Not that I can't put the time on the river that some of my friends can. There are friends that will put 5, 6, 7 nights in, especially pre-spawn. I try to shoot from 1 or 2 nights a week, and then post-spawn, it's, I'm lucky to get a night a week, if that. But, try to put your time in, you catch some big fish, and now it's even on the professional side, we have a catfish technical committee. If you had told me before I came into the organization that you'll be known as a catfish person, I said, what? So, that's the idea. You guys talk a lot about industry and getting involved. I would say a good message to send out to people is don't search for a particular thing. Maybe let something come to you. Catfish came to me. Outdoor writing came to me. I wasn't looking for those opportunities, but when presented with them, I recognized them for what they were and tried to make the most of them.
That's exactly what happened with me. And in the rough fish or lesser popular fish, it kind of came to me as like, wow, I want to learn about this now. And who knows what'll happen to me in 10 years. I mean, I just pulled out the fly rod last night, and it's part of angling that I've done half-assed, and I want to get into fly angling a little bit more.
It's one of those things where
art to it.
If you want to get into, like we've said, want to get into the outdoors, look into writing. I mean, it walks of life from all different departments in the world. So I mean, is the Minnesota kind of the last question here? Is the Minnesota, from your perspective of the DNR, are the numbers doing good in general for everything? And that's a hard thing to wrap your head
numbers
around.
Isn't like,
but
is
everything just going good from a DNR's perspective in Minnesota? Are you guys satisfied with?
No, I don't think you're ever satisfied. It's like what's the tagline for the Lexus luxury sedan company? The relentless pursuit of perfection, right?
Right.
You'll never be perfect, but you should do your darndest to try to be perfect.
Right.
Well, I think it's the same idea. You're trying to do the best that you can. You're trying to give people the best opportunities. We use the best available science that we have, and fish and wildlife science is always evolving. So you're trying to keep yourself trained in on that. You're trying to provide good opportunities. I would say no, it's not perfect. It's not where we want it to be because we're always chasing it down. There's conflicts out there. Right. There's things that we struggle with that we may not be able to address that are ongoing. But we're trying to get there. We're trying to learn what we can. We're trying to address those things. You're always looking to the future, and we're actually doing that right now. We have a strategic plan coming together for fish and wildlife where we're talking about what's the future going to look like? What does success look like in the future? What are we doing to address the challenges of tomorrow with the funding issues we have?
Right.
There's all those types of questions that come up. If I reframe the entire question and say, do you have a good thing going on with natural resource management and what we have in Minnesota? I would say yes. I mean, fishing, hunting, have some unbelievable opportunities, some beautiful places, tons of public land. This is a great place to be in the outdoors. This is a wonderful place.
I couldn't agree more. And just a little comment on what you were saying there. Yeah, the one common factor in your line of work, it'll never be perfect, is because Mother Nature throws kinks in it all the time, and that keeps you on your toes. It keeps things fresh. It proposes new challenges. I think that's a big aspect of it all. I mean, our world is changing. We can go on another podcast about climate change if you want, but that's something that I'm sure is being talked about. I mean, I've noticed different things since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a beautiful day out there. Guy can fish in, striker float shorts. That's what I want to propose.
Well, all I would add to that is, and I'll make it short and sweet, is I won't get into the politics of it. I'm not a meteorologist, but I'm a fish biologist. I can tell you what we see with ranges of fish on northern or southern edge of their ranges. We see movement, things that the hospitable range for those fish has changed because we have seen documented changes in water temperatures in those lakes. So all of a sudden, temperature is a part of habitat. And if the habitat changes, different fish community dynamics are going to change as well. So it's a real threat and concern for the fish side of things. I'll leave it at that, short and sweet.
Perfect. That is a great answer.
Well, we have officially hit over 2 hours in a podcast, which is, besides my butt hurting, that's about it.
Hungry.
It was awesome to have you in, talk a little fish nerdiness, a little bit about DNR, a little bit about this and that. The giveaway that you're giving is awesome for anyone who just skipped to the end. Find it in the middle to figure out how to win that. But it was a pleasure having you in here. I know you were super excited to be here, but we're more excited to have you because you have brought a different outlook into the outdoors that we want to hear, and I'm hoping we get more people like you on here as well as we go through the next couple months and get other perspectives, marked off the list. But
thank you so much.
We've
been talking about doing this we've been planning this for a few months, figuring out when we can make this happen, and it's been a real honor. And
it's been my pleasure. You guys have a great thing going. Don't sell it. I know you're not, but don't sell yourself short. It's a wonderful venue. You guys do a great job. Energy, creativity.
It's not
fun.
Completely finished in here, but it will eventually. We're just working to it. But we appreciate you coming. We appreciate your support on the Broken Line. We appreciate it all and appreciate the giveaway, and of course you being here. Yeah. I'm Aaron.
I'm Scott.
I'm Patrick.
And this is
The Broken Line.
You nailed it.
Wait, one more question. Star Wars or Star Trek?
No, it's Star Wars.
Okay, good. Cut. End of show. Good answer.
Thank you for listening to Broken Line Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media. Like, share, comment, and subscribe.